You've done the math, not with numbers, with years. A career that functions, relationships that hold, enough financial ground under you to not panic. And somewhere in the middle of an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon, while the calendar fills itself with obligations that are supposed to matter, you feel it. Not sadness, not depression, something quieter and harder to locate, a stillness beneath all the activity. The sense that none of it, not the work, not the future you're carefully assembling, not even the people you love most, is actually pointing anywhere. That caring has become something close to habit. And somewhere in the back of your mind, a voice you've been trying not to take too seriously keeps asking the same question. What is any of this actually for? In 1882, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote something that became the most misunderstood sentence in the history of modern philosophy. God is dead. People read it as victory, as liberation, as atheism finally announcing itself in public. But Nietzsche was frightened when he wrote it, not triumphant. He didn't place those words in a manifesto. He put them in the mouth of a madman who runs into a sunlit marketplace at noon, holding a lantern, shouting into full daylight. Not because the madman is looking for God, because he's desperate for anyone to understand what the loss will cost. Nietzsche saw it before the rest of the modern world was willing to look. If the old framework of cosmic meaning collapses, if religion loses its authority, if people stop believing that existence was assigned a purpose from somewhere above, something corrosive will move into the space. He named that something nihilism, and he called it the deepest, most dangerous crisis the modern world would ever face. Here is what almost nobody says about Nietzsche. He hated nihilism. He spent the rest of his productive intellectual life trying to find a way through it. The man who diagnosed the problem most clearly was the one most terrified by where the diagnosis led. And that terror, it turns out, was the most honest response possible. You have probably felt what he was afraid of, without naming it. Nihilistic thinking doesn't arrive like grief or despair. It arrives like sudden clarity, like finally seeing through a production you've been a part of for so long you forgot you were performing. You're at a dinner table, laughing with people you genuinely like, and somewhere behind your eyes a quiet voice says, "What is this for?" Not cruelly, almost gently, like a child asking a question no adult wants to answer in front of the other guests. And the cruelest trick of nihilism is that it doesn't take anything from you. It leaves everything exactly in place. The career is still there. The relationships still exist. The food on the plate is still warm, but something invisible has been removed. The assumption that it all accumulates into something. That there is direction. That the whole structure has an address it's moving toward. And without that assumption, even the things you love begin to feel slightly unreal. Like furniture in a house you are no longer sure belongs to you. Then the paralysis sets in. If nothing means anything in any ultimate cosmic sense, why fight for the promotion? Why repair the relationship that keeps fracturing in exactly the same place? Why try harder, want more, wake up earlier? The logic holds together too well. That is what makes nihilism genuinely dangerous. Not that it's irrational, but that it sounds like the only rational conclusion available. And once you hear it clearly enough, you cannot unhear it. But the thinkers who lived closest to this edge reached conclusions that have nothing to do with surrender. And what they found is not what you would expect. In the winter of 1944, a Viennese psychiatrist named Viktor Frankl was separated from his wife, stripped of his manuscript on the psychology of meaning, tattooed with a number, and transported to Auschwitz. Within a matter of hours, everything that could define a person, identity, work, family, freedom, future, was removed. What Frankl witnessed over the months that followed became the foundation of an entire school of psychology. He watched men die not only from cold or starvation, but from something more interior, the loss of a reason. And he watched other men, in objectively worse physical condition, survive. The difference, as he later described in Man's Search for Meaning, was not physical strength. It was whether a man had something to live toward, a person to return to, a work to finish, a truth to witness. Frankl called this the final and irremovable human freedom, the freedom to choose your response to an unavoidable situation. His therapeutic method, logotherapy, rested on one conclusion. Meaning is not found like a buried object. It is created, generated through commitment, through love, through the willingness to stay devoted to something larger than your own comfort. This was not a new idea. In the earliest Pali Canon texts of Buddhism, the concept of sunyata, emptiness, had already arrived at a parallel truth from a different direction. Sunyata sounds, at first reading, like nihilism's closest philosophical relative. Everything is empty of inherent existence. Nothing possesses fixed, permanent meaning from within itself. But the Buddha's point was the direct opposite of despair. If nothing is inherently meaningful, then nothing is inherently meaningless either. You are not imprisoned inside a fixed story about what your life must amount to. The emptiness is not a void. It is open space. And space is exactly what you need in order to move. What both Frankl inside Auschwitz and the early Buddhist tradition at the Deer Park in Sarnath understood is this. Nihilism asks the right question and makes the mistake of stopping one step short of the answer it points toward. The French philosopher Albert Camus completed that step. Writing in the shadow of World War II, he declared that the only genuinely serious philosophical question was whether life was worth living. His answer was not a system or a theology. It was a single image. He asked you to picture Sisyphus, condemned by the Greek gods to push a boulder to the top of a hill, watch it roll back down, and begin again. Eternally. And then Camus said something that sounds absurd right up until the moment it doesn't. We must imagine Sisyphus happy. Not because the boulder gets lighter, not because the hill gets shorter, but because the moment you stop waiting for the gods to furnish the boulder with a cosmic purpose, you discover you already carry one. The act. The choosing. You. Nihilism doesn't destroy meaning. It demolishes borrowed meaning. And what it leaves behind, if you're willing to stay in the room with it, is the raw material for something far more honest than inherited certainty ever was. I think about Camus' image on the days when the work feels circular, when I reach the end of a long effort and find nothing waiting on the other side of it. The nihilistic voice shows up in those moments, and I've stopped trying to argue it down. Because it's right about one thing. There is no external architecture built to give meaning to your particular Tuesday. No committee granting cosmic approval. No invisible logic beneath the surface of ordinary life guaranteeing that it adds up to something. Nietzsche was honest about that loss. But he also pointed toward what was possible on the other side of it. What he called the will to power. Not domination over others, but the capacity to engage creatively with your own existence. To make something. To commit to something. To stay devoted to something, knowing it is temporary. You can experience nihilism as an abyss. Or you can experience it as an opening. The abyss says, nothing matters, so why try? The opening says, nothing is pre-assigned, so you choose what matters. Same emptiness, entirely different life. What Frankl found in Auschwitz, what the Buddha taught in the Deer Park, what Camus wrote in post-war Paris. They arrived at the same understanding by entirely different roads. Meaning is not a condition of life that you either have or don't. It is a practice. Something you generate, not something you inherit. Something built in the direction you keep choosing to walk, even when the ground feels uncertain beneath you. The philosophy that says your life has no meaning is not wrong. It is incomplete. It identifies what isn't there, the inherited certainty, the cosmic guarantee, the ready-made story, without seeing what that absence makes possible. Most people stop at the verdict. Before the real question arrives, here it is. Not whether your life has meaning, but what you would choose to build it from, if you knew with absolute certainty that no one was ever going to hand it to you. Albert Camus wrote that the struggle toward the heights is itself enough to fill a human heart. He wasn't offering consolation. He was describing something he had actually verified, in a century that gave him every reason to stop looking. The boulder is yours. The hill is yours. What you do with the next step, that is the one question nihilism never answers for you.